The eyes of the nation get started on a noon on Saturday. We get things started going out to University Park, Pennsylvania. Some people like to call this place Happy Valley. We got number 10 Penn State hosting the number 3 ranked, undefeated Michigan Wolverines. This is going to be the Fox noon kickoff. Fox Sports, their version of College Game Day, is going to be here at Beaver Stadium. And I'm going to tell you this, Penn State is one of the most challenging environments in college football to try and play in. And Michigan has to go into their house. And for Michigan, we figured that they were going to be 9-0 at this point in the year. We have not seen Michigan play a opponent that's ranked in the top 25 at any point in this season. We talked about that strength of schedule. We know that Michigan's schedule was in that bottom 25, bottom 30 teams in the country. So we knew that there was a good chance, unless there was some serious chaos, that we were not going to see Michigan drop a game. And that has happened for the Michigan Wolverines so far this year. Matter of fact, they have not been embroiled in a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter all season long. So we've seen Michigan, yes, they've had a very weak strength of schedule, but with that schedule, do what they're supposed to do. And what they've done with that schedule thus far is they have simply went ahead and took care of business in terms of, okay, this is our schedule. Let's go ahead and take care of the teams on paper. And they've done that so far. But for Michigan, we know 2 of those last 3 games are entitled to. The season gets very real for the Michigan Wolverines very quickly. As Drake would always say, you want to talk about going 0 to 100 real quick? For Michigan, it does go from 0 to 100 real quick. And like we talked about in this intro, things can come at you very fast. And that's why coaches are always paranoid no matter what time of the season it is. Think of what happened to Oklahoma, for example. Just a few weeks ago, Oklahoma was undefeated. They controlled their own destiny to get to the college football playoff, to get to the Big 12 championship. And listen, maybe Oklahoma did have those expectations, at least reasonable expectations to be back in that spot, but only took 2 games. Bedlam game and the game against Kansas, and now they're out of it, and now they need some help to get into the Big 12. For Michigan, it's the same thing. And with this schedule in mind, it's very important for them to win out because of what those tiebreakers is. Do you understand what could happen? Let's say Penn State finds a way to beat Michigan, and we'll talk about how I think what's going to be keys of this game and who I think is ultimately going to win the game ultimately moving forward. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I just wanted to set the foundation of what could happen, what kind of scenario we could be dealing with. So let's say Penn State beats Michigan. The Nittany Lions already lost to Ohio State, and then a few weeks from now, we see Ohio State lose in Ann Arbor to this Michigan squad. We could be dealing with a three-way tie for the Big Ten title. And there are 8 separate tiebreakers that are in place in the event that 3 teams are tied. But it goes right back to number 5 if that scenario takes place. Because in that scenario, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, they would have not lost any Big Ten games outside of that cohort. So it goes to 5. And now all of a sudden, the West Division indirectly chooses who goes to the Big Ten championship over in the East Division. Because that 5th tiebreaker is if the records of 3 or more teams are tied, they'll be compared on the best cumulative conference winning percentage of non-divisional opponents. And going back to that strength of schedule, let's say Penn State beats Michigan, all of a sudden, one, Michigan needs to beat Ohio State, but then two, they will need Penn State to drop another game. And for the Nittany Lions, they already played Ohio State. What they have after this, after this game for Penn State, they got Rutgers at home, and then they have Michigan State on the road. Now, Rutgers, I think, is a solid football team. That game was actually closer than what the scoreboard indicated when they took on Ohio State, when they hosted Ohio State in their building. So Rutgers is certainly a solid football team, one that's already bowl eligible. Greg Schiano's doing a great job there. Certainly not a game that you can automatically write in as a W. You actually have to show up and play that particular game. Michigan State is a different story, so we won't crap on Michigan State so too much. But that's what's at stake right now. Not only that, for the conference championships, and Michigan with that lower strength of schedule than a Penn State and Ohio State, they don't want to be in that 3-team scenario. And then vice versa, going up to a higher level in the college football playoff. Can you imagine if there was a freeway tie? You have 3 11-1 teams in the Big Ten Conference. What does the college football playoff committee do with that? That's a tough question. That is a very difficult answer to arrive to. And if that scenario happens, I would not want to be in that college football playoff committee room. I do not want to wish down on anybody, because no matter what you decide to move forward with in terms of who makes that 4-team playoff, in that scenario, there would be at least one team from the Big Ten that would be in, I would imagine. But then does it open up the door possibly for a second Big Ten team to get in? Who knows? I'm just saying, a lot at stake in this game. So that being said, laying that foundation, what are the keys to this particular game between the Michigan Wolverines and the Nittany Lions of Penn State? And I mean, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Not only does Michigan have that to worry about, not only do they have these 2 of their hardest games of the season happening in the next 3 weeks, and Maryland is no pushover either. They're right in between. Could be a letdown game, by the way. We might talk about that next week. How does Michigan handle those distractions? It's been nonstop talk about what the NCAA could possibly do, what the Big Ten Conference could possibly do. Now, Jim Harbaugh was already suspended for 3 games this year. But here's the thing about that. Jim Harbaugh was suspended for a separate thing. It was a recruiting violation involving, giving a recruit a burger, and now all of a sudden you see all these sign stealing allegations, and the NCAA is going to give they're going to do their thorough job doing their investigation. They say they're going to expedite the process, but me personally, I don't think that we're going to have a decision this year. I think that if it's true that this sign stealing did happen and it happened in an illegal way, Michigan should be held accountable. But what does that look like? The Big Ten, on a sportsmanship policy, what they can do is that they could suspend Jim Harbaugh for a couple of games. And for now, Jim Harbaugh is coaching in this Penn State game. But a lot of things can change in the span of 24 hours. We have seen a lot go out in different ways. I'm not going to dive into the specifics of that, but what I will say is that Michigan is dealing with a lot. And how does Michigan's, as a program, handle that? Not the team. I'm talking about the program, the structure as a whole. How do they keep themselves focused on the task at hand? And the task at hand is going into Beaver Stadium and beating this really good Penn State football team. It could be channeled in a positive way. It could be channeled in a negative way. It could be channeled in multiple directions. It just depends on the makeup of the guys that are in your team, in your locker room. It depends on how those alphas handle that situation. The players, if the right players are leading this team, then, hey, maybe Michigan could channel it in a positive way and take it personally. And we get a show that Penn State is truly not rangered for. But if not, then this season could spiral out of control quickly, and it could be an Oklahoma situation where You're undefeated and you control your own destiny, but then you're looking up 15 days later, all of a sudden, oh, we're out of the playoff hunt. It can happen just like that. And that's why it's so hard to get into the college football playoff, because it's really a survive and advance. You know, we're talking about kids that are 18 to 22 years old, mostly. There's some outliers, but the point is this: it's hard for 18 to 22-year-olds to be consistent all the time, especially with all those distractions that are happening. Now, going into the actual game at hand, it's going to be comes down to how there's going to be a key matchup that's going to be happening for sure. We got Penn State's rush defense going up against the vaunted running game of Michigan's offense. We know that Michigan has that duo of Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, and those two went off last year when these two teams got together over in Ann Arbor. When these two teams got together, the difference in that game was that running back duo. They ended up piling up over 400 yards of rushing. That's 4 football fields, ladies and gentlemen. Also ended up with 4 touchdowns. That was the difference. Penn State could not stop the run, but the rushing defense for Penn State is a little bit better than what we saw from them in the previous season. Because the reason is this: Penn State has one of the best rushing defenses in the entire country. They're allowing just over 60 yards a game. That is better than what they were last year. This is one of the elite rushing defenses in the entire country. Ohio State was having a hard time running the ball at them. Their defense was just playing at a higher level. That's why they won, not just because of being able to solve Penn State's defense on a consistent basis. So how is the front seven for Penn State? How are they able to hold up, right, in that regard? Because if Michigan can reestablish that running game like they did last year, it's going to be a world of trouble, because what we have also seen over the course of this year as well is that we have seen J.J. McCarthy, while he was good last year, I would say good to above average, depending on what your opinion is. We've seen J.J. McCarthy, for the most part, take that next step. He has more yards per attempt than last year. He has a significantly higher completion percentage than last year. Last year, he was only completing 65% of his passes. He's already completed almost 76% of passes at the Division I college level. His touchdown interception ratio is about the same, but if you take away that Bowling Green game, he actually hasn't thrown a single interception all year long. Those 3 interceptions that he's thrown this season, it all happened in the Bowling Green game. And that happened in what, September? Early September? So it's been almost a couple of months since the last time J.J. McCarthy has actually turned the football over. How does J.J. McCarthy, can he establish a rhythm? If in the event that, hey, our run game isn't really getting going, can J.J. McCarthy come out and win this game? And it could ignite a Heisman Trophy campaign. He's already in the mix. He's considered one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And because of that, by default, because of how we prioritize quarterbacks over every other position in college football when it comes to the Heisman Trophy, automatically J.J. McCarthy is in that Heisman Trophy conversation. So we'll see what happens there. Can J.J. McCarthy have that ability to come out, win a very tough game happening on the road? That's what I'm really curious about here. Now, James Franklin, one more thing that I want to note about James Franklin before I get into my prediction. I see talk that James Franklin is overrated, but I don't think there's a lot of people out there, when they talk about James Franklin, they don't really understand what being overrated means, right? So here's the thing with being overrated. That would imply that he was perceived at a higher level than what he actually is. And I think a lot of people would agree that James Franklin is considered a third best coach in the Big Ten, in the Big Ten East. No one is really putting him above Ryan Day. No one is really putting him above Jim Harbaugh, whether you love him or hate him. So he might be properly rated, but the question is, does Penn State deserve better? Now, that's a conversation that could be had. Michigan, this is one of Jim Harbaugh's best teams that he's had, and this might be his last best shot to win a national championship. Next year, Michigan schedule is going to be a lot more difficult. They're going to lose a good chunk of core guys, likely to the NFL, as well as definitely to graduation. Penn State, James Franklin might have one of his best teams as well. So we could be in for an epic title clash on the way here coming up. What I think is going to happen in this game. So we'll take a look at what Vegas says. And this is as of last night. I woke up recently this morning. I'm recording this about 8:30 in the morning. I woke up about half an hour ago, to be honest with you guys. So I haven't checked the betting lines this morning. But last night, as of Thursday night, Michigan was favored by 4.5 points. Now, you see the model here. The model thinks the wrong team is actually favored. The model actually believes that Penn State should be favored by that 4.5, not the Wolverines of Michigan. So what do we think is going to happen in this game? At the end of the day, we've seen teams deal with distractions. Hell, we saw Georgia deal with distractions in the offseason with their with the car racing and their alleged issues with their culture being put into question. We've seen those things happen, but this is different. This is constant. Everyone and their mama is talking about what's going to happen to this Michigan team. And I think no matter how strong and how structured your program is, from the top to bottom, an organization can only handle so much. There has to eventually be a breaking point. And now that we're going to see Michigan play a college football playoff caliber team, I mean, Penn State is still in the running, of course. I think that breaking point might actually be today, especially with an amped up Beaver Stadium that is going to be loud. It's going to be proud for its Nittany Lions. So we're going to have Penn State not just cover here today. We are actually going to have Penn State winning this game outright and handing the Michigan Wolverines their very first loss of the entire season. But you know what? That's why the game is played on Saturday. I think this is going to be one of the more intriguing games of Saturday. And it's going to be a great appetizer for what's going to be coming on later on in the afternoon into the evening tomorrow night.